In this video, I'm going to give you my predictions for UFC Las Vegas. We'll look at the entire card, we'll look at some parlay pieces, prop opportunities, and some betting opportunities on this card. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Last week, Chalk Donkeys had a field day. Almost every favorite won except Valentina Shevchenko, who was on her way to winning if she didn't throw that spinning kick to the body. We have another big card here just like last week, but I do think that more underdogs will come through this week, and we'll talk about that as we go through. But let's not waste another moment. Let's get right into it. We have our main event with Petr Yan and Merab Dvalishvili this week, a fight that we're lucky to have 5 rounds to watch. We'll get to see that sharp technique from Petr Yan that's always fun to watch, and we're going to see that high motor from Merab, who's going to be pushing a pace for 25 minutes. And Merab the Machine has a ton of momentum coming into this, riding that 8-fight winning streak, and what I expect him to do this week is what he does every week. And what I like about Merab is not only that he shoots for the takedowns, but if he's stuffed, he's not deterred. He's going to shoot for takedowns, shoot for takedowns.
I'm going to go get the papers,
And his wrestling is what's winning him rounds and winning him fights. He's wearing down on his opponents, and he's got world-class cardio to keep that up, making him a difficult fight for anybody in the division. Everybody talks about the crisp boxing from Petr Yan, and that's true, but what's overlooked is the footwork. He puts his hands and feet together better than almost anybody we've ever seen. And because of that, I expect him to touch Merab up this week. Merab's entries are fast, explosive, accurate, and frequent, but his control on the mat is where he's weak. He trains with Aljamain Sterling, who has experience against Petr Yan and was able to control him on the mat. But let's not forget he went 2 for 22 on takedown attempts. But even with those takedowns, he was able to find Petr Yan's back. He was able to control him, land heavy shots, but Merab doesn't exactly have that in his locker, which is why you see him landing 12, 13 takedowns in some of his fights. It's because guys get right back up. He doesn't control them well on the mat. But he's got a tall task on his hands this week against Petr Yan, who's one of the most technical fighters in the world, and a lot's always made of his hands. And guys with really good takedown defense will give him trouble, like Jose Aldo did when he went 0 for 16 on takedown attempts. And on the feet, he really doesn't offer all that much. It's very simple, it's very basic, and I think that Petr Yan touches him up and wins a decision. He's going to bust Merab up at range, and the thing about Merab is that he's a dominant fighter. He puts a pace on guys, breaks their will. No one runs through Petr Yan. He's 16-4, with those 4 losses being 1 illegal knee that he landed on Aljamain Sterling, and the other 3 are split decisions. So a disqualification in 3 fights that could have went either way. No one runs through Petr Yan. So if the rounds are close and damage is king when it comes to judging, then Petr Yan wins this fight by decision. Next, we're looking at a fight with Alexander Romanov versus Alexander Volkov, the Alex Bowl. The line for this surprises me, especially with the way that it opened up. I know money has come in on Romanov, so I think we're starting to get to the right side here publicly, but I thought that the line would be a little bit wider, and a lot of that obviously has to do with recency bias. MMA is a what have you done for me lately kind of game. We know that. And Romanov is coming off a majority decision loss to Marcin Tybura, where he gassed out, but on that card, everybody gassed out. They were at Elevation in Salt Lake City, and he was kicking Tybura's ass in that first round. But Tybura was able to fight through it, put it on him in the second and third round, and win that fight. Now, Romanov taking his first loss, that's not always a bad thing. That's something that you kind of like to see out of guys that you're looking to bet on at times. They get the first loss out of the way, they're not trying to protect a perfect record, and they learn from that experience. But again, he's coming off of a loss. Now Volkov's coming off of a first round finish over Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And one can argue that the stoppage was a little bit early, but Biggie Boy had it coming. He was hurt, he was in a bad spot, and Volkanov either was going to finish him there or finish him 30 seconds after when the ref stepped in, so fine stoppage in my opinion. Volkov is a tall, long striker with a ton of experience and good enough cardio to fight a hard 3 rounds. On the feet, he has a clear advantage, and I could see him knocking out Romanov sometime in the second round with the combinations that he throws, but on the mat, he's in trouble. Prior to Romanov's last fight, he was nothing short of a dominant grappler and somebody that we thought maybe we could see at the top of the division challenging for a title. That's been squelched a little bit, but I think he can make some serious strides this week with a big win over Volkov, because we've seen Volkov struggle with grapplers before. He was taken down 14 times by Curtis Blades. Tom Aspinall went 2 for 2 on takedown attempts and then submitted him in the first round. Volkov bulked up a little bit after the Curtis Blades fight, while Romanov has actually slimmed down. He's weighing in under 240 now in his last 2 fights, but historically was having to cut to get to 265. He's 6'2", while Volkov is 6'7", so to be the smaller, faster man is going to be able to help him get his takedowns in the first, and we know that he does great work on top. And also, just the experience gap, I think, is a detriment at this point to Volkov, because he's not old. 34 is not old. old for a heavyweight, but he does have 45 professional fights on his record. We don't even need to consider the damage he's taken in these fights because we could just look at the sheer amount. The guy's been fighting as a pro for 14 years. That's countless hours of training, sparring, getting hit in the head. Romanov's only been a pro since 2016, and most of his wins are early finishes. So we may have damaged goods on our hands with Alexander Volkov, and for that reason, I'm going to take the younger, fresher fighter, the better grappler, and the slightly buy low spot on King Kong. The pick for me in this fight is going to be Alexander Romanov by submission. Next, we have the rebooking of Ryan Spann and Nikita Krylov, a fight that was supposed to be our main event a couple weeks ago. Now it's a 3-round fight, and I'll just go back to what I said then. Nikita Krylov versus Ryan Spann. So this is Krylov's second act in the UFC. It's been going on since 2018. Mixed results. He's 4-4 since returning, but he's lost to very tough competition. And on the flip side, he's winning against guys that you would expect him to beat. Now, he can do it all. He can strike, he can wrestle, he's got a ton of experience while only being 30 years old. And last time out, we saw him go full Daniel Cormier on Volkan Oezdemir, where he took him down 7 times, controlled him for nearly 10 minutes. So he looked really good there. And in his fight before that, he knocked out Alexander Gustafsson, who admittedly is pretty washed, but he did it in impressive fashion. Now, on the other side, you have Ryan Spann, who's quietly putting together a very strong UFC career so far. He's 7-2 in the promotion, with his only losses coming to Anthony Smith, who was just better than him everywhere that night. No shame in that. Anthony Smith has spent years at the top of the light heavyweight rankings, and he also lost a fight that he was winning against Johnny Walker. He was rocking Johnny Walker multiple times. He was also able to take him down, but ultimately he was shooting for a takedown. Johnny Walker starts landing some elbows, powerful hammer fists, and that's all she wrote. But outside of that, he's looked really solid. And I will say he was a bit questionable against Sam Alvey. That was not a good look. But early on in that fight, he looked real good, and he looked great last time out when he knocked Dominic Reyes out with essentially a jab. I like the tools that Ryan Spann has. I don't like the gas tank. I don't think that he's the kind of guy that could fight a hard 5 rounds, not even a hard 3 rounds, really. But I don't think he's going to have to worry about his gas tank this week because both of these guys are finishers, and I don't see the 3rd round starting in this fight. Not only do both these guys get finishes, but they also leave themselves open to get finished. So the winner of this fight on DraftKings is going to score a ton of points. Exposure to either side if you're running multiple lineups is something I'd recommend. But from a straight betting perspective, I think there's a ton of value on Ryan Spann as the underdog here. I like Spann to win this fight because of the power that he has. We know that Krylov doesn't have great striking defense, and the submission threat from Spann is there, especially when Krylov starts shooting for takedowns. Most of Krylov's losses are coming by submission. Most of Ryan Spann's wins are coming by submission, and he has those long, slender arms. He's able to snatch up guillotines real quick, and that power on the feet opens up a possibility for a club and sub. I like Ryan Spann here. I think that he'll look for takedowns of his own as well. So give me the bigger guy, give me the better grappler, and give me the guy with the better price tag as well. Give me Ryan Spann to win this fight by submission. Everything I said there still applies. It is a little bit concerning to me that Ryan Spann is going to have to cut weight again. He's going to have to make 205 again. The 3 rounds versus 5 rounds doesn't change anything for me because this is a fight that I didn't think would see the 3rd round anyway. So the pick is still Ryan Spann this week. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Y'all been crushing it with the likes, so I really do appreciate that. And comment something for the algorithm. Let me know who's winning this week, who the best underdog is this week. I'd love to know. This next fight with Ricardo Ramos versus Austin Lingo, the line is way too wide here. Austin Lingo could be had for plus 300, and I think this fight's a lot closer than the line would indicate. Ricardo Ramos is good everywhere. He can grapple, he can strike, but he also gets touched up. He relies heavily on unreliable technique like that spinning back elbow, and a lot of guys we've seen him beat in the UFC either aren't really UFC caliber or he was just a really good matchup. For example, Danny Chavez continues to lose fights in the UFC. He loses a decision to Zubair Tukhugov, who's no longer in the promotion. He beats Bill Algeo because Bill Algeo can't defend a takedown. He secures 8 takedowns in that fight, wins a decision. That's a good win. Knocked out in the 1st round by Lerone Murphy. Edward Gatagori is not UFC caliber, as we know. Journey Newson has 1 win in his 5 UFC fights. Gets knocked out in the 1st round by Nurmagomedov. This was a split decision against Kyung Ho Kang that really could have went either way. He knocks out Ayman Zahabi with a spinning back elbow, but before that elbow landed, he was on the back foot. He was getting hit, and Zahabi looked like he was rolling. And then Tanaka, who I believe is is 1-6 in the UFC. So, I mean, he's not really beating the creme de la creme. And with MMA betting, we're looking to attack value wherever we can, because what Austin Lingo has is forward pressure. He throws heavy hands. He has a lot of toughness, and he's fighting out of a good camp. All the things that you would want. He's not old. He's not physically weak. Like, he's in a good spot, and I think that he's very live to win this fight. I think this fight should probably be -150, at the most -200 for Ramos. I think this fight is just way too wide, and taking a shot on Austin Lingo makes a ton of sense. Even from a DraftKings perspective, if you want to take a shot on Austin Lingo, I'm not mad at you. And I know we've seen Ricardo Ramos win as a big favorite in the past, but he's not the kind of guy that I think warrants a -350, and he's not somebody who's a parlay piece either. So keep that in mind when you're building out your parlays this week. Just because the number looks good, you don't want to put this guy in there. This is a dog or pass situation. The pick for this fight's still going to be Ricardo Ramos, but again, the hips, the hands, the heart from Austin Lingo. I mean, we saw Jeff Neal almost pull it off last week, and we talked about him the same way. So again, the pick is Ramos, but the line is way too wide. Pick is Ramos, the bet is Austin Lingo by far. Next we have Said Nurmagomedov. Said Nurmagomedov is a beast. On the feet, he throws crisp hands, heavy hooks, nice leg kicks, nice wheel kicks. He throws to the head, the body, the legs, everything. From a grappling standpoint, his grappling is defensive, which you really like to see. He throws a lot of ninja chokes out there, guillotines. He's not looking to take guys down, but if guys look to take him down, they're in trouble. Even in his last fight against Said Yakub Kakhramonov, who's damn good, he wins that fight by submission in the second round. Kakhramonov was getting out of the same submission multiple times in that fight, taking him down, and Nurmagomedov was starting to look real tired in the second round. But he still finds a way to win that fight, which is impressive because it shows how lucid he is during that high intensity situation. He's dead tired. He's got a beast on top of him working his grappling. Kakhramonov wasn't tired at all. That guy can do that all day. But he was still able to get that forearm under the neck and get the choke that he needed. We saw him struggle a bit as a big favorite in his fight before that against D. Silva, and that's what kind of gives me pause here, because yes, he did the same thing that he did to Kakhramonov to Cody Stamann. I don't rate Cody Stamann all that highly. We just saw Luan Lacerda give Cody Stamann problems in a fight that could have been judged either way, in my opinion. Mark Striegel was a catfish and a half. We know who Mark Striegel is by now. He loses a decision to Raoni Barcelos, and I think the kind of guy that he's going to struggle with is a guy like Jonathan Martinez, because Jonathan Martinez moves well. He's going to stay in his face. He's going to throw a lot of leg kicks, and he's going to throw things like flying knees up the middle. At times you'll see the output wane a little bit for Jonathan Martinez, but I still think that he's going to be the one throwing more strikes later in this fight. And I think the leg kicks are going to make a huge difference, because again, Nurmagomedov's looking to strike, so he's going to stay on his feet, and if he starts chopping away at the legs like he did in his last fight against Cub Swanson, he can give him serious problems. But you'll notice he also goes the decision a lot, and so does Nurmagomedov. And from a betting perspective, I think a decision bet is the best way to attack this. This fight goes the distance. You could take the over, because neither guy is going to be looking for takedowns. Nurmagomedov wants to strike, and Jonathan Martinez isn't looking to get choked. So if this fight stays on the feet, it's going to come down to who can have bigger moments and who can land more strikes, and I think that Jonathan Martinez gets the edge. Because at Nurmagomedov's price, we've seen the guy make enough mistakes and get put in enough bad positions where I don't know if you want to pay that amount. I think that there's a lot of value on Jonathan Martinez as the underdog this week. Again, those heavy leg kicks can make Nurmagomedov second guess what he wants to do on the striking, and when you look at a betting line, you can get better than 2-to-1 odds for Jonathan Martinez right now. So I would go with Jonathan Martinez as the pick. I wouldn't mind you taking him as a bet, but I think the best bet in this situation is going to be over 2.5 rounds. Next, we have a UFC debut of Victor Petrino. He's fighting Anton Turkalj, the pleasure man, this week. I like Petrino this week because of the big power in his hands. I think this takedown defense is going to hold up early, and I think that Anton Turkalj doesn't have enough form on the feet. Where the pleasure man does his best work is when he's on the mat. He's able to get guys down, implement his wrestling, and I think that he would have success there if he's able to get this fight to the mat, but I don't think that he's going to be able to do that. I think that Petrino's going to dig his heels in, land a heavy hook, get this guy off balance, and knock him out pretty early. And you might just be a little low on him because of his performance last time out against Jailton Almeida, but to say, oh, I'm a grappler, and then to be decimated by Jailton Almeida like that, it's not a great look. He put up less resistance than Parker Porter did against Jailton Almeida, to give you an idea. Now, this is back at 205, so that does make more sense for him, but I still think that Petrino is going to be able to land one of those big shots. The line for this fight is close, but you might as well just take Petrino by knockout. I think that makes the most sense. And one more thing that I'd add to that is that Turkalj is billed as a grappler coming out of that gym, but he also lost a grappling match to Alexander Gustafsson, so take that for what it's worth. And next we have another UFC debut. Carl Williams is going to be fighting Lucas Brzeski this week, and I think that Carl Williams has the tools to win this fight. I really like the physical strength from Williams. I really like the power in his hands, and I really like the offensive wrestling when he needs to turn to it. We saw all that on display in his Contender Series fight, and I think we see that again this week, but I do think that he gets an earlier finish over Brzeski, who doesn't respond to damage all that well. Brzeski does put a lot out there, he does have good experience, and he is coming off a fight that really should be a win, and maybe if that was billed as a win, the odds would be a little bit different, but it was a bad decision. He should have won that fight. He doubled up Martin Buday on strikes, moved better than him, basically beat him everywhere, but I do think that Buday was landing with slightly more power. But I think that Williams is a much better athlete here, and I think when they both land, it's going to be very apparent who has more power. I also think that Williams has more tools here. If he wants to take Brzeski down, I think he's going to be able to, and I think if Brzeski tries to take Williams down, he's going to get stuffed. So give me the UFC debutant, give me Carl Williams to win this fight, and I believe he wins by knockout. Our next fight is with Davy Grant and Rafael Assunção. Davy Grant is scrappy as hell. He has an iron chin, sneaky power in his hands, and he's coming off a knockout win over Louis Smolka, but before that, he went to war with Adrian Yanez in a fight that really could have went either way. On the feet, I think he absolutely touches up Rafael Assunção and likely knocks him out. But on the mat, I think that Assunção can have a field day with Dangerous Davy. Here's why. We've seen Davy Grant taken down and controlled in the past, most recently by Marlon Vera, and Rafael Assunção does a good job of mixing in takedowns, and he has a strong top game that could lead to him winning more minutes and winning more rounds. Just like in his last fight against Victor Henry, who was a better striker, he was able to stifle that with his wrestling and his control time. So on one hand, you have the power and the grit from Davy Grant, and on the other hand, you have the wrestling and jiu-jitsu from Assunção. So it really comes down to who is going to be able to do a better job of implementing their game plan, and I think both of them are going to be able to do a good job. I think Assunção is able to win minutes, and he's going to be able to get those takedowns that he needs to do so. But I also expect Dangerous Davy Grant to have success with his more debilitating power, and if both of them have success, one guy's success is controlling the fight, the other guy's success is ending the fight, and that's why I think Davy Grant goes on to win this fight. I see Davy Grant catching Rafael Assunção with one of those big hooks that he throws sometime in the second or third round, but I think early on Assunção is going to have a little bit of success, but the pick for me in this fight is Dangerous Davy by knockout. Next, we have the UFC debut of SD Dumas. He's fighting Josh Fremd this week. Josh Fremd is 0-2 in the UFC after dropping his UFC debut to Fluffy Hernandez, but there's no shame in that. Fluffy's a monster. But then he follows that up with a submission loss to Trishan Gore, which is just a terrible look. He made a mistake, left his neck out there, and nearly got his head ripped off. But outside of the UFC, he has a lot of experience, good LFA experience, and a lot of finishes on his record. On the other side, Cedric Dumas is coming in hot into his UFC debut, currently undefeated, 7-0, picked up a quick win on the Contender Series where he was able to get a takedown with little to no resistance. Then he snatched up a guillotine, and Dumas looks like a slick striker and an aggressive grappler, and he's a fighter through and through. He was supposed to fight Abu Azaitar in this spot, but now he's got Josh Fremd, and I think that's a slightly tougher fight for him. I think Dumas is a ton of fun, and I could see him winning this fight in the first 2 minutes. But I can also see Josh Fremd winning because he has richer experience, and I think he's in a better spot in terms of pressure and spotlight. Dumas has a good amount of hype coming in, a lot of attention, but he's a polarizing guy. People are watching, and he's making his debut that comes with a lot of pressure, nervous energy, and expectations. Josh Fremd, again, is an 0-2 replacement who isn't getting nearly as much attention. He has UFC experience out of the way, though, and he could play spoiler in this spot. I know we talk a lot about the level of competition, but it's important, and if you look at the guys that Dumas has faced, it's really low level for the most part outside of his last 2 fights, maybe outside of his last fight. The current records of the guys that Dumas has beaten start at 2-20, yes, you heard that right, 2-20, 1-4, 5-9, 1-1, 3-1, 9-6, and last time out 7-1. Fremd has fought in Bellator, LFA, UFC, he's faced guys like Fluffy Hernandez, Gregory Rodriguez, and Fremd is a big dude for the weight class. A lot of the guys that Dumas have faced are either a lot older than him or a lot smaller than him. Josh Fremd is 29 years old and bigger than him. So give me the underdog in Josh Fremd this week to play spoiler, to ruin the hype a little bit. We'll see Cedric Dumas still pick up UFC wins and be a fun fighter on the roster, but I do think that this is a bad matchup. I think that Josh Fremd has the recipe this week, and another guy who at his odds is worth taking a money line shot on. Next, we're looking at a fight with Mario Bautista and Guido Canetti. Guido Canetti has been nothing short of surprising in his last 2 fights. He smoked Chris Moutinho early in the first round by letting his hands go, landing a ton of hard, unanswered strikes. And then he follows that up with a big upset win over Randy Costa, where he picked up an even earlier finish. In that fight, they traded low kicks. Costa was off balance. Canetti blitzes in, grabs the body lock, drags Costa down, jumps the back, wins by rear naked choke. It was awesome. And Canetti for as old as he is and how bad his record is, he is surprisingly well-rounded. However, that Cinderella story comes to an end this week with Mario Bautista, who currently is a -1,000 favorite, something crazy like that. Mario Bautista is coming into this fight on a 3-fight winning streak with wins over Jay Perrin, Boom Kelleher, and Benito Lopez. And what I like from Bautista in these recent wins is that he's leaning heavily on his grappling, and that's an encouraging sign because he's already a good striker. He's also a strong grappler. Those things mix pretty well. His most recent loss is a knockout loss to Trevin Jones, which in hindsight seems a bit fluky, but he did also drop his debut to Corey Sandhagen. But outside of that, he's looked dangerous and fantastic in the UFC. His money line is a little too outrageous, but an inside the distance shot is definitely worth it if you want to bet this fight straight up. But this should come as no surprise to you. Bautista dominates Canetti this week. He wins this fight wherever it takes place. It doesn't go beyond 1.5 rounds, so if you want to take the under to get better odds, that makes sense. But Mario Bautista inside the distance is the play. Next, we have a fight with JJ Aldrich and Ariane Lipski. This is an easy JJ Aldrich spot considering the matchup, and she should be a parlay piece of yours this week. JJ Aldrich does everything well. Nothing great, but everything well. She can strike. We saw how good she looked on the feet, winning the first round against Erin Blanchfield and most of the second round before she got tied up into submission. And we just saw how good Erin Blanchfield looked on the feet against Jessica Andrade. We know she can grapple offensively and defensively. She has good training partners like Miranda Maverick to help her get ready for this fight. Ariane Lipski is coming off of a knockout loss at the hands of Priscilla Cachoeira, who's a big fan of the show, I know. Shout out Priscilla. But Lipski's been finished in her last 3 losses, most recently that knockout against Cachoeira, and then the 2 back-to-back losses via TKO on the mat to Montana De La Rosa and Antonina Shevchenko. They both took advantage of her poor grappling, and I expect JJ Aldrich to do the same thing this week. Because when Lipski gets taken down, she has a hard time getting back to her feet, and I think that JJ Aldrich needs 1, maybe 2 takedowns this week to win this fight, because that grounded pound is going to be heavy, especially if she gets in her in full mount or crucifix or anything like that. And even if this fight plays out on the feet, I do favor the output and the steadiness from JJ Aldrich. But I don't think they'll spend too much time on the feet because I don't think she's going to give Lipski her best chance of winning. So I expect her to get it down to a dominant position, rain down strikes, the ref steps in and calls it. Sneaky DraftKings play, sneaky betting spot too if you want to take JJ Aldrich by knockout. Next we have a fight with Victor Henry and Tony Gravely. I have beef with Victor Henry. The dude makes his UFC debut against Raoni Barcelos at +400 odds and absolutely takes Raoni's lunch money. He landed over 200 strikes that night, over 180 of them being counted as significant strikes. He was Max Holloway that night. He also defended 6 of 7 takedowns, and the one time it was secured by Barcelos, he popped right back up. So that day he killed so many Barcelos lineups, so many Barcelos tickets, but then he follows that up with a weak performance against a 69-year-old Rafael Assunção. He was taken down, controlled, outlanded, losing nearly every round, and that was at -400 odds. So definitely a Jekyll and Hyde situation on our hands with Victor Henry. But on the other side, we have Tony Gravely, who historically has been DraftKings gold. That is, of course, when he's winning his fights, because he is a strong wrestler with power in both hands who has the tools to be a tough fight for almost anybody in the division. Maybe not Javid Basharat, but most guys. In fights that he's winning, he's either stunning his opponents with the power in his hands, or he's out-grappling his opponents and pushing that grueling, wrestling-heavy pace. My issues with Gravely are that his striking at distance leaves a bit to be desired, and he does have a tendency to leave his neck in harm's way, which is why most of his losses have come by submission. Guys that will give Gravely problems are guys that have durability, high output, takedown defense, and submissions off of their back, and we have a situation where Victor Henry looks like all of those things. And the thing about Victor Henry is, in his 28 professional fights, he's never been finished. We've seen what a ceiling performance looks like for Henry, and we know that he's got a lot of submissions on his record. So while it's a tough fight to call, I'm going to go with Victor Henry to win this fight because I think he has more ways to win, and I think he has a style that can give Gravely trouble. And that's if, and only if, he doesn't come out flat like he did against Rafael Assunção. But the pick for me in this fight is going to be Victor Henry by decision. And the last fight we're looking at is with Tyson Nam and Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva's the favorite here, and it makes sense to me. 7 years younger, and the UFC graphic shows us on every card that a guy who is 7 years younger or greater is winning 65% of the time. Silva's implied probability to win sits around 62%, which means he should be winning this fight 127% of the time. I like the matchup. He's got power in his hands. He aggressively crashes the pocket. He looks for takedowns, and he fights out of one of the best, if not the best, gym in all of MMA right now at Fight Ready. Training with one of the best flyweights of all time in Triple C, he's primed and ready to have a solid win in his comeback and push his win streak to 3. On the other side, Tyson Nam has a ton of experience. He has power in his hands too, but I think he only wins this fight by early knockout. He throws a lot of strikes, but he's not very accurate or efficient with them, and he isn't somebody who's going to win a lot of minutes for you, and he allows time and minutes and rounds to slip away. I think he'll do too much waiting here against Bruno Silva, too much waiting to counter, lining up the perfect shot, and time's going to just rip off of the clock. And while he's waiting, I think Bruno Silva's going to start landing strikes and getting takedowns, and you'll find that Tyson Nam has 100% takedown defense, but that's a little misleading. The only man to attempt takedowns on Tyson Nam was Kai Kara-France, who went 0 for 4, but he's also got 25% takedown accuracy. That man couldn't take down Christmas decorations. So I see Silva having a lot of success here, more so with his grappling, avoiding that power from Nam early, and I think that he grinds out a decision, again pushing that win streak to 3. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, and I'll see you later in the week.